Chapter 9. Natasha got into an auto and told the driver to take her to a mall some distance away. She noticed several buildings that had come up in such a short time and remembered the time several years ago when she and Vikram had gone hunting for a house. That was the time when he had included her in many decisions. Now, nothing she said or did mattered, neither to him nor to Diya. Vikram was clever enough to hide his anger for Natasha in front of Diya. Their daughter worshipped him and hated her. She suddenly had an idea. She wondered if it had anything to do with her postpartum depression that lasted several months after Diya was born. In hindsight, she knew she should have seen a doctor about it and gone on some sort of medication, but there was no one to talk to about why she seemed to be so depressed all the time. Neither her mother nor her mother-in-law were great listeners, and she didn't want to burden them further with her postpartum depression. To add to her woes, Diya was a colicky baby, and she had bouts of crying when nothing shushed her except rocking her back and forth continuously or turning on some white noise like the static of the TV. The sleepless nights, fatigue, body changes, including cracked nipples, were enough to make Natasha severely depressed. Secretly, she hated Diya. It was a thought she never dared voice out aloud, but it was so powerful that it transmitted itself through her bodily fluids. She wasn't surprised when the child began reciprocating the feeling as she grew up. Much later, when she visited a therapist, the doctor told her it was all hogwash. It was just stubbornness in Diya that made her who she was, and had nothing to do with Natasha or a postpartum depression. That was simply hormones. All women were allowed to experience postpartum depression, and maybe even hate their children at some point or another. It was a natural thing. It didn't mean anything. They would get over it and still love their children and look after them forever. But Natasha, it seemed, didn't get over hers. Her postpartum period was traumatic. Vikram was of no help then. She used to be continuously hungry and he refused to give her more food. What was required for a model wasn't enough for a nursing mother. And he desperately wanted her to get her figure back as soon as she delivered. She couldn't care less then. She just wanted to stuff herself with cakes and chicken puffs and see if that would make her happy. She would stuff her drawers with biscuits and chips and eat them in the middle of the night when Vikram was asleep. She felt even more miserable lying to Vikram about it, but he soon lost interest in her losing weight and started his temper tantrums over the smallest issues. "Why were all the lights and fans on?" he would yell when he entered the house. "Why is there no milk for tea?" he would shout in the morning when she had just about fallen asleep with Diya next to her. Natasha was lost deep in her thoughts and didn't realize that she had automatically got out of the auto and walked inside the mall and reached Tea Leaf and Coffee Bean. "Yes, ma'am?" the man behind the counter said. "What would you like to have today?" "Oh," she shook off the daydreaming. "A cappuccino, please," she added, "and a chocolate chip muffin." It had been a long time since she indulged herself in anything nice. "Would you like chocolate sauce with that?" the young man asked. And she just wanted to bite off his head and say instead, "Do you think my body needs chocolate sauce? I just want a little happiness in my life. Not everything has to have extra chocolate." But she just shook her head. "No, thank you." She paid the amount and turned to find a table. Standing behind her in the queue was Sarita's son, Rahul. "Arey, Natasha auntie!" he exclaimed. She cringed. How did she get from the 18-year-old nuts who was labelled that for being a wild child to Natasha auntie? "Just Natasha, Rahul," she said and started walking. He took a few steps and said, "I'm so sorry if I offended you." "I'm not that much older than you," she said. Of course, she was lying through her teeth. He laughed. "But what's wrong with being auntie? I happen to like older women. They're far more mature and womanly than the girls around me." Was he flirting? Natasha wasn't sure. Maybe making polite conversation. Either way, he was her friend's son and she didn't want to encourage the chatter. "They're waiting for your order. See you later, Rahul." She walked away. He went back and stood in line. She'd just started on her cup of coffee when Rahul came over. "Do you mind if I sit with you?" "Why?" It was her first thought. Why would a young teenage boy want her company? He sat down anyway. I'm alone, you're alone, we can be alone together. It was typical teenage talk that actually made sense to Natasha. Have a seat, she said, with a warm smile. Seeing Rahul and hearing him talk brought back her modeling days when everyone was free with each other. Adolescents spoke openly without fear of consequences. Marriage bound you to think before you opened your mouth, as the repercussions could label you in a negative way. As a teenager, she had spoken her mind, done what she wanted, and lived a free life. As a married woman, Natasha had kept her bindas attitude in check and spoken only when needed. Did marriage really change life's rules for women? Natasha wondered. She'd always felt constricted by the concept of marriage and the rules that society imposed on married women. Who said she couldn't have coffee with her friend's son? It was a harmless 5 minutes. She needed a little bindas in her life. She wanted to speak openly and freely without fear of being judged as a bad wife or a terrible mother. She wanted to know how adolescents thought nowadays and if it had changed from her time. She was actually delighted to listen to a teenager talk about his overly stressful life. Somehow, Rahul opened up to her, sharing details about his life. She assumed it was because he needed a new perspective on his issues that no one else was able to give. I can't tell you the stress this woman has been giving me, Rahul said as he sipped his cappuccino. He spoke about his girlfriend as if Natasha was a close friend. And my parents and grandparents don't give me any money. How is a teenager supposed to live with no money? I can't buy things. So if I avoid the woman because I don't have any money, she gets bugged. How can I tell her that I can't take her for a movie because I have no money? And once, when I asked her to pay for us, she said, "Oh, you're so cheap. All boys are supposed to pay if they like a girl." Where the hell is women's lib? They're all down with equality and shit, but when it comes to paying for their own stuff or taking a dude out, they're all like, "No, it's not chivalrous." Natasha burst into laughter, the first time in ages that a man had made her laugh. She suddenly realized, though, that he might not like it that she was laughing at his stories. "I'm sorry," she said, pushing a plate of muffins towards him. "You want some?" "You're making fun of me, aren't you?" he asked with a smile and took a spoonful of chocolate chip muffin. "You know, this cup of coffee is the only indulgence I have for myself once a week. My parents think teenagers shouldn't drink coffee. Which world are they living in?" "I agree, everyone should be allowed a cup of coffee," Natasha said, as they clinked their cups and took a sip. "So where do you find the money for your weekly indulgence?" Natasha knew she meant that as a simple statement, but Rahul took it as a wicked twist and smiled provocatively at her. "By indulging in a weekly ritual," he said with a smile, and Natasha's eyes widened. He laughed out loud. "You should see your face. You look so shocked." She laughed too. "I work every weekend at a hobby class. I teach children drawing and painting." A boy of 18 was teaching art classes? Incredible! How many children? Where? How do you know any drawing? Her questions came in quick succession, and it pleased him extremely. "I used to sketch quite well, took classes when I was in school and became quite good. So now I take classes for small children, aged 5 to 7. Not too tough to show them how to color in between the lines. And it gives me about 10 grand a month. So I can afford to buy a coffee when I want, or a mobile if I save up, but not enough to take a girl out to expensive places twice a week," he said, as he showed Natasha his iPhone. "I would love to sketch you one day. You've very different features. You're not like the other aunties." Natasha smiled again and reprimanded him. "Oh God, I always hated being an auntie. Never call me that again. And by the way, young man, I'm way too old for you to be flirting with me." "Arey, I'm not flirting." "But I can't tell you the truth or what? It seems like no one had paid you a compliment recently." Natasha realized that it was true. No one had said she was beautiful for a long time. Vikram had stopped noticing a long time ago. Sometimes she wished he would just tell her how to improve herself, as he used to. At least then, he was taking an interest in her. Now, he didn't bother. He gave her money whenever she wanted, and wasn't the least concerned about where she was going or what she was doing. He had become just an ATM in her life, without any emotional attachment or physical attraction. In a way, it was good because she wasn't accountable to him anymore. But a wife somewhere likes to be accountable to her husband. Not all the time, but just once in a while, so she feels important in her husband's life. Okay, you can sketch me, she said unexpectedly. But you can't show it to anyone. Rahul beamed. Give me your number, I'll come over tomorrow. Not tomorrow, Natasha laughed. But soon, I'll let you know. They exchanged numbers, and she said she was going to do some shopping and went off, while he went in another direction. Natasha recognized a nice feeling in the pit of her stomach at that moment. He was young, but he had a streak of independence that she admired. And he wasn't bad to look at either. Natasha bought herself a dress that day. She planned to wear it when sitting for her portrait. She wondered how teenagers were so misunderstood. Here was a boy who was earning his own money to manage his life. He didn't ask his parents at all. And there was her child Diya, who constantly asked for more money and refused to do even basic chores in the house. How different they both were. Yet their lives would be so intrinsically woven that it would lead to fatal decisions.